Right, and that's why I think the role of a lactation consultant and also postpartum doulas is it's so important because you and your significant other have the same goal of trying to help establish a nice foundation for your newborn, and but you both need support, not just the mom. And I kind of see it as a cycle of us treating men or the men in our lives or significant others, could also be female, that they're not as important or that their struggle isn't real, and therefore it kind of becomes that for them. So if our perspective is that they don't have as big of a part in this, then that begins to be the role that they play.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 220. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show. I am your host, Lori Jill Isenstadt, IBCLC, and I help moms with breastfeeding. I'm having so much fun this season on the show. The best part is getting to meet new people and getting to know some friends even better by getting to interview them. This is the case with today's guest. I first met Shannon and her husband John during their pregnancy. I had the pleasure of being their breastfeeding educator and then their lactation consultant once their beautiful baby was born. It's way too long, so I don't remember the exact circumstances. However, Shannon did have a big problem getting the right help after her son was born. There were no lactation consultants on staff during the weekend she gave birth. The nurses all said that the baby was latched on well. She spoke to her baby's pediatrician. She had quite a few healthcare providers trying to help her, but everybody said that things were going well, but it was hurting her. Pity the poor mom who gives birth in a hospital on a weekend or a holiday. Help in some of the hospitals are slim pickings. She said they had to make her leave the hospital as she didn't want to leave and was heartbroken that breastfeeding was still hurting her. She wanted someone to help her. She stayed an extra day to get some help. By the time she left the hospital, it was hurting so much she was pumping, and they gave her a nipple shield to use. Certainly not what she planned on doing. More of this part of her story. So let's get to the interview right now. Shannon is the founder and CEO of SisterMom, a support website for moms. She is a licensed counselor with a Master's of Science in Counseling and a Bachelor of Arts in Interpersonal Communication. She has worked in the behavioral health field since 2001. Her clients include everyone from kids and families to Fortune 500 companies. She developed and teaches the perspective process, which provides a solid foundation for happy relationships. In addition, she has a handsome Italian-American husband and a feisty Italian-Irish Native American son, who I have met both, and I've seen your handsome husband on some videos. I think the last one I watched is when you're all singing happy birthday. And I love how your son is he bi or trilingual?
He's trilingual.
Trilingual, that's so
Yes.
Spanish, Italian, and English, right?
Yes.
That is so cool. What a gift you're giving him.
It's actually for me because I'm going to teach him those things, and then when he gets older, he can teach me. I'm getting the Italian. I can understand it, but it just doesn't sound right coming out of my mouth. But I understand and can translate.
I love listening to your husband talk Italian to him.
Yeah, me too.
It's just so much fun. All right, Shannon, well, welcome to the show. And I would love for you to tell us that was, some of your background, but I'd love for our listeners to be able to learn a little bit about the life that you lived when you were a little kid and growing up, where you grew up and what that life was like.
I had a good life. I grew up in Peoria, Arizona, which at the time was a kind of a small town. I remember not having to lock the doors if we
Mm.
left the house, and you didn't lock car doors. That wasn't even necessary. You might actually live around the same area, and it's much different now. I remember when I was in eighth grade, they built a mall, and then after they built that mall, it was just, it became a suburb. But I grew up with horses, and we had ATVs and motorcycles. We just would go out in the desert. Nature was really big for us, and my parents would just let us go just outside, and we could play in the front yard, and it was great. Both my parents, my dad worked really hard. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, went to school, and I just have good memories.
Yeah, in this area, you have to keep going further and further north and west to get that kind of a lifestyle because suburban sprawl has definitely taken over. Where I am now, I used to have all north of me desert. And people, I'm sure, would say about the development that I'm now in, like, look what they've done to us. And now
I know.
I say the same thing because we're going way north all the way to Lake Pleasant now.
All the way, yeah. So I'm north. I was north of you. Those people are like, what are they doing? They're building all these track houses everywhere. They weren't there when I was growing up. It was all desert.
Yeah,
And I
I'm
grew
one of
up,
those people now.
yeah, I grew up by that mountain, and I used to take my horse, and we used to just ride around Thunderbird Mountain, hang out with my friends, and go swimming in Agua Fria River whenever it was full.
And in the days when, like you said, never mind not locking your doors, just to let the kids go out in front and play and
Mhm.
to be a mother and to not, I don't know this, you can tell me, but I have a feeling your mother was not outside with you all the time, watching every step you made. She could literally let you out of the house and play and called you in for lunch or dinner, right?
True, yes. We used to just go play with the neighbors. I remember we had this neighborhood dog. His name was Fred, and he was a big basset hound. And we lived on a dirt road, and Fred often would just go sleep in the middle of the dirt road. He was sleeping in front of our house, just asleep, and everybody would just, drive around him. Everyone knew Fred, and he was fine, and he was perfectly safe sleeping in the middle of the road.
In other words, the HOA would be in an uproar. You'd have to get laws. You have to get the speed bumps so you don't drive too fast through the neighborhood. Like a whole
Yeah.
big Megillah, not just something as simple as just drive around Fred.
Oh, yeah. Well, now Fred would be the speed bump, but we
That's
don't want
true.
that.
That's true. Tell me a little bit about, did you have dreams and aspirations when you were a young girl or a young adult? And are those dreams and aspirations different than what you're currently doing in your life?
I did. And it's funny. I was just talking to my husband about this the other day. When I was a little girl, what I wanted for Christmas was a chalkboard. And, they didn't have whiteboards then. So I wanted a chalkboard. And I finally got it. I was so excited. And I would just play teacher and play school all day long. I'd get my little chalkboard out, and, 1 + 1 = 2. And I was teaching all of my dolls and things. So I really, really wanted to be a teacher ever since I can remember. And then as I got a little bit older, I was really into horses. And I thought, the best thing that I could do is to combine horses and teaching. That would be like the most amazing thing ever. So I decided that I wanted to work with horses and teach people. And as I got older, I learned about this equine assisted psychotherapy thing that you can do. So I'm like, well, I'll become a counselor, and we'll work with horses and people. And that's what I ended up doing. So one thing led to another. And I think I did eventually end up accomplishing my dreams. I didn't know exactly that's what I was going to do from when I was 5, but I had an idea.
Before you became a mom, were your ideas about who you would be and what you would be doing as a mom very different than what you're currently doing?
Oh, yes. My kid was never going to eat Lucky Charms, that's for sure.
Or
And now
Fruit Loops, right?
or Fruit Loops. He still hasn't eaten Fruit Loops, so I'm still holding on to something. But the Lucky Charms, see, the problem is I love Lucky Charms. So, never say your child isn't going to do anything if you're not willing to give it up.
I know.
Yeah.
I was telling my daughter the other day, you can only hide your things so much. So one of the things that we used to have was Haagen-Dazs. And when Alicia, and
Ah.
it was a treat, but when they're little, they don't know what you're eating, right? But then when Alicia, my first, got wind of what we were eating, then it became this hidden thing that we kept way back in the freezer and only took out after she went to bed at night. And then it just changed with a couple of kids. If we didn't want them eating it, then we just had to decide we weren't going to eating it and didn't have it in the house. But that's funny. Like you said, if you don't want your kid to have it, you got to stop having it.
Yes, you would think. And so, for Halloween, being a good parent, what we do is like when we go trick or treating, I only let him, because we did like 5 Halloween festivals.
Wow.
So each time we would go to a Halloween festival, he got one piece of candy. Our candy bag's getting bigger and bigger, and some of it's chocolate, which is amazing. So I give him one little piece of chocolate, and then now I'm like, I kind of consider it a good parent for you to be like, okay, you have to eat all your fruits and vegetables first, and then you can have this piece of candy. And then he does. And then, bedtime, you put him to sleep, and then you go eat all the rest of the Halloween candy.
Yeah, out of the house and into your body. I was going to say, do you steal your favorite ones?
Yes, I didn't get any Reese's. I mean, he didn't get any Reese's this year. Very upset about that. But we got Hershey's. And yes, I'm doing it for my child. We can't have all this in the house tempting him.
Yes, it's so funny what we say we're going to do and what we actually wind up doing.
It's true. I think it became more of a balance. There's this ideal mom that I hope to be, and there's mom that I didn't want to be, like just give them whatever food they want and not being concerned about the environment, all that. It's a balance, and I kind of hit somewhere in the middle.
It's like sometimes I have a love-hate relationship with that word balance. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about mothering life and balancing and all that fun stuff when we talk about SisterMom, your website. First, I want to hear about your breastfeeding story with your son. I'd love for you to tell us your son's name and how old he is now. What I really want to hear about to start off with your breastfeeding story is for you to tell us what it is that you thought breastfeeding was going to be like, and then what the reality was like. But whenever you thought about breastfeeding, did you feel like you needed to take a class, a course, watch videos, hang out with other breastfeeding moms? So I just put a whole lot in that little package. So your son's name and age, if you're comfortable doing so, and then take us back to how you prepared for breastfeeding.
My son is Luca, and he's 4 years old now.
Hard to believe.
I know. Can you believe it? I tried to prepare for everything, not just breastfeeding, like the whole delivery. I did everything. I read. I actually was working in a corporate job, and I was able to quit and take time, a few months, just to prepare. And I spent a lot of time researching. I took classes. I mean, I don't think there was anything I didn't do. I really wanted to be prepared. I'm like the academic type. I want to read. I want to talk to experts. I want to be prepared. Have my list. It was great.
And that works for a lot of us in other parts of our life, right? But it's a big shocker to learn that it doesn't necessarily always translate to our mothering life.
True. And I think the one thing that I learned that I think that every mother can relate to is that there's no real way to prepare until you have that child in your hand. You're never going to be 100% prepared, but that's okay. That's okay. But there's things that you can do to get support throughout that process.
Did you take a class were you birthing at a hospital?
I was.
So
yes.
Did you take classes on breastfeeding and infant care, and dad's classes did he take at the hospital that you were delivering at?
I actually hired a birth doula, and my birth doula was certified in a couple of different things, including hypnobirthing. So she came and did the hypnobirthing and a class and educated me on like things that I could do to get through labor, trying to teach me and prepare me. And we had probably 2 or 3 classes with her. And then, of course, I could always call her and talk and ask questions. So I think having a birth doula for me was like really important in just getting my mind set. Because I think sometimes you get in your mind of the unknown, especially it's your first kid. You don't know what's going to happen, and you get in your mind and it starts circling and it spins out of control. So a birth doula will really help, give you the information, answer your questions, and be there for you.
If I had my druthers, every mom, at least the first time around, would have access to a birth doula if she so chooses, because they help you in so many different ways and can be available to you before the birth, at the birth, and then really a valuable resource for other things that you might need in your life, other
Mm-hmm.
areas of support for after you have your baby. So that's wonderful. So tell me
Yes.
a little bit about the very early days of breastfeeding. Can you remember and go back to that?
And then just one other thing that I did, I took a breastfeeding preparation class with you. I don't know if you remember, but me and my husband was there. We were there and you went through the whole breastfeeding education to help prepare me, which is really, really important.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. It's really important. And I'm going to piggyback on that and say I'm thrilled that you were at class, and I teach classes and I love doing so. And to me, classes are about, with regards to breastfeeding, learning about what's normal, learning how you can tell when things aren't going so well, and connecting with someone so that if things aren't going well, you've already made that connection. When you start
Right.
breastfeeding, there is a huge learning curve. And just because you took a class, like just because you read a book on parenting or diaper changing or taking care of a baby, their sleeping and eating habits, doesn't mean that it's all just right there for the knowing and works out nice and smooth once you have your baby. You have this information, and then you have to take into account that your baby is a cute little individual person. And so
Mm-hmm.
you take what you've learned, what you've heard, and what you see right in front of you, and help to put all that together. And that's where that learning curve comes from.
Right. And I did feel like, especially after taking your class, I did feel much more prepared. But I will say that, like, when you're a part of the mom groups and
Yeah.
you're on Baby Center and everyone's telling you their experiences and you hear these like horror stories, oh my gosh, okay, the more education I can get, the better. And I think what was really good for me taking a class with you is that you ended up being my lactation consultant that we'll talk about in a few minutes. When I did have problems, I was able to go to you, and you and I had already established that relationship. So it wasn't the first time that I showed up to you in tears, like, it's not working. That was our first meeting. I had already met you before and taken, spent an hour or two with you.
Yeah, and that's helpful because no matter how comfortable we are with our bodies, and some aren't necessarily as comfortable as the next woman, but you're emotional, anxious, sometimes in pain, worried, things, a lot of negative emotions if you're going to see someone because you're in crisis mode. And then to be calling up people out of the blue, having nowhere, not knowing where to go, and walking into a stranger's home or having a
Mm-hmm.
stranger come into your home to be able
Your
to take
little
a look at
new
your
baby.
baby and your body and your breasts, I think is really, really hard. So that's just another one of the many reasons I think it's great to connect with someone beforehand. If and when you are in crisis mode, that's the worst time to be looking for an expert to help you with something so emotional and so intimate. So it's another great reason to take classes.
That is so powerful. Exactly what you just said, that whenever you're in that trauma, when you're in the emotions, that's not when you want to be looking for help. So
Right.
ideally. But I will say that during, you probably don't even know this, but during our class, the one thing that you said to me was, breastfeeding shouldn't hurt.
Yes.
And if it does, then something's not right, something's wrong. And I remember later on when I was struggling so much before I saw you again, you just were talking in my mind because I had was going to all these other experts. I was going to these other experts and they're like, nothing's wrong, everything looks good. And I'm like, no, here's Lori in my mind. Breastfeeding shouldn't hurt. I'm like, but it's hurting. And so that's just kind of moving forward ahead to my experience. But you were in my head, and that one statement stuck with me.
That's a good thing. I love hearing that because I don't remember telling that to you exactly. I almost always say that in class, and I have it on my website. In fact, in class and on the podcast, many people will hear me say that's one of my mantras, that it's not supposed to hurt. And if it's hurting on day one, something isn't right. If it's hurting on day two, something is just really not going well. And if it's hurting on day 3, get help, because it's not supposed to hurt. And so I often say there are like 5 things that if the people leave my classes, because I cannot teach you how to actually breastfeed, because if your baby is still in your belly, we can't work on that. So there are only so many things that we can do as far as showing you videos and talking about the art of latching a baby on. But there are some really good tips that I could give you to let you know, hey, things are going great. And I'm going to send Lori an email saying, thanks for the class, baby's doing well, and all that good stuff. Or, ooh, I've learned a few tips, and these are the top 5 things. I have like 3 of them that Lori said, oh, I don't think it's going so well. So if women can get that it's not supposed to hurt, even that alone, I feel like, yay, I've done my job. Because what that does is motivate you to seek help rather than sit home in that place listening to other people who tell you, yes, it does hurt. You have to wait. It could take 3 weeks. It could take 6 weeks. You just have to muster through the pain. And of course, I'm like, no, that was her experience, but it doesn't have to be yours. It shouldn't be. And that pain is a sign that something's wrong. So don't just muster through it, because what happens with a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure, what did you feel like doing at times? You just feel like giving up because it's so painful. You don't want to give up and you're struggling not to, but you just cannot stand the pain.
Exactly. And, I kind of consider myself I'm a scrunchy mom. So I'm not 100% crunchy, but I do my best. So they call us scrunchy. And it was never a doubt for me. I always knew I was going to breastfeed. I just knew. So whenever it became difficult and the thoughts start running through your head that I don't think I can do this anymore, it feels like you're failing. And it's the one thing that you want to do for your baby. I mean, there's so many studies that show that breastfeeding has so many benefits health-wise and even IQ. I mean, that's huge. Of course you want it for your baby if you can do it.
What was happening with you that I hear that you were in pain. Was there anything else going on that you felt that you needed to seek help?
Well, after I had Luca in the hospital, the first couple, I mean, he latched on really well. Everything seemed to be going okay in the very beginning. The first few breastfeeding sessions, I'm like, sometimes they're like, oh, it takes a while to latch and don't give up. Oh, not me. My head, he just hopped right on. He was, I'm like, okay, we're good. So I would say, probably 12 hours into it, it started hurting. I mean, I kind of figured maybe my breasts were tender, so I wasn't too concerned in the very beginning. But 12 hours later, you know how often newborns breastfeed?
Very often.
Yeah. He's like latching, unlatching. I'm like, okay, this is starting to hurt. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Can we call in the lactation consultant? Well, my son had the audacity to be born like on a weekend or something, and they didn't have any of the lactation consultants there. So I'm like, okay, that's fine.
I'm going to pause you for a second, because that just drives me insane. That whole notion of weekends, so the lactation staff is sparse or non-existent. Holidays, the same thing. I mean, mothers are giving birth 24/7, weekends and holidays. And if they need help with breastfeeding, of course, I want IBCLCs there helping mothers and or staff that is well trained to be able to help a mother in waiting for the IBCLC to come on board. But it's crazy when we're told, no, they're not working today. So that means you don't get help with breastfeeding your baby, I guess.
Yeah. And I want to say, and I don't remember, he was born on like a Friday. So by the time it really started hurting, it was like they were gone for 2 days. Yeah. And I know the nurses tried to help, but they tried. I say tried because they just came in and told me I was doing good. I mean, they're like, he's got a good latch. He's doing really well. But it was hurting.
So we think we're a little crazy, right?
I know.
They're telling us it's going well, but it's starting to hurt us.
Yes, exactly. And so I just kept at it, of course, asking about that lactation consultant, became more and more adamant about it. And I actually stayed in the hospital an extra day because it wasn't working. So I'm like, I can't leave right now because it hurts so bad. You guys need to help me. By the time I left the hospital, my nipples were already starting to scab. They were, yeah, they were already getting raw, and I like was refusing to leave. They kicked me out of the hospital. I swear, I kid you not. I'm like, I'm not leaving. I'm like grabbing onto the hospital doors, like, don't send me out. I can't, this breastfeeding thing, I don't have it.
You've given birth to a baby, you're in a hospital, and it's hurting you. And where better to think that you can get help with breastfeeding your baby, because once you give birth, that's what you're doing very frequently. And so,
Right?
yeah, I could understand why you're saying, help, I'm not leaving until I get the help I need.
Exactly. They literally kicked us out. Literally. They just were like, you cannot stay here any longer. And by the time I left there, they had basically advised that I use a pump. They're like, okay, the breastfeeding thing's not working. You should just pump. They had showed me how to pump before I left, and then I was gone. That's what they did to help. Because I would refuse to leave until I got something.
You get booted out with a pump.
I got booted out. And a nipple shield, which I did not
nipple shield.
Here's a nipple shield.
I do have to say that while that is not the best way to go about things, that at the very least, at least they talk to you about pumping to help remove the milk if breastfeeding is so painful. So I'm happy about that.
They taught me how to use the pump.
Okay.
That was very, very helpful. I just remember driving home from the hospital, and, you know, they always say, because it was day 3, right? By the time I'm actually headed home. And they say that's kind of when your milk comes in day 3, 4. That's when you might like get the hormones. You know, I honestly can't tell you if it was motherly hormones or probably a little bit of both, but a lot of it was just being so frustrated from not being able to breastfeed and that leaving the hospital with a pump and a newborn. So
sad.
Yeah, very sad. It was very sad. So as soon as we got home, we started trying to get a hold of all the lactation consultants. I think we left you a message. We were able to get in with somebody. I had already saw 2 lactation consultants at the hospital, 2 different ones. Plus, I talked to the pediatrician and anyone that would listen, you know, nurses. I want to say I at least talked to 4 or 5 different professionals. All said everything looked good and that we were doing good.
What message did that send to you? In other words, I'm seeing 4 experts in this whole breastfeeding thing, and everybody's telling me that I'm doing well, that the baby's latched on well, and you're not feeling it. So what's that message to you?
That breastfeeding should hurt. That you're doing, that's the message I was getting from them. And I'm like, okay, but you know, we're starting to get some scabbing here. So this is kind of like not normal. I mean, I've talked to a lot of friends and been on mom boards. And like I said, it kept running through my mind. Lori says breastfeeding shouldn't hurt. For some reason, I can't remember. It's been 4 years, but you and I could not hook up right away when I got out of the hospital. So I went to another lactation consultant. By the time that I went to her, my ankles, because you know this is postpartum, and I was so swollen. My ankles were so swollen that they couldn't even bend. I could barely walk. But I'm just telling you this so you know I was determined. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like gonna drag myself in here, like, and I'm gonna get the help that I need so I can breastfeed. And I kept asking about, do you think he's tongue-tied? Do you think he's tongue-tied? Because that's the only thing I could think of. Can you check him? That's what I had the pediatrician check. Can you check for tongue-tie? And everybody said he wasn't tongue-tied, but I knew something was going on. And so ironically, the lactation consultant that I was able to get to on a Sunday or whatever, when no one else was available, well, she gave me a little bit of bad advice because she told me to start feeding him through a dropper, which I don't think ended up being really good because then we had trouble getting him back on the breast and back on the bottle. But she was kind of at a loss because she didn't know if he was tongue-tied. She's like, I'm not sure. Let me refer you to Lori.
You're like, ah!
And I'm like, okay, I will get the appointment with Lori. After all these people, I'm like, I need to go see Lori. And then finally I went and saw you.
What was your husband doing for you during this time period while you're in this emotional state? How was he helpful to you?
Well, he's very good at scheduling things. So he's that kind of guy, which is really helpful whenever you're just trying to do things. You're in the moment. And I wasn't able to plan ahead. I mean, I guess I probably would have been able to, but it's really hard because I'm just in the moment trying to feed this newborn every hour.
Right.
So he was on the phone scheduling and doing all the research to find a lactation consultant that could help us. That was very helpful.
When I first met him, and then when you had come in for the consults, he is a very, very hands-on guy. And he's
Mm-hmm.
one of those guys that I could tell he was listening to everything that I was saying. He was taking notes, and I mean, it's a funny kind of thing, but some guys say like, if I could breastfeed for her and help her out, I would. And he was just one of those guys that was just like that.
You're right. I mean, he pretty much did everything except breastfeed. He
Yes.
scheduled the appointments for me. And then even you were kind of helping me with the latch, and he would help me like put him on. And so he was literally hands-on right
Yeah.
there.
All right. So he finally gets you to come in to see me. And then what happened?
Yes, we finally got our appointment, and within minutes, you told us he was tongue-tied. You were the first person. I was asking and asking about it, and
What did
I'm
that?
like, ah, yes,
Okay.
I knew it.
So I was going to say, what did that feel like for you? Because it could go either way for me when I'm working with a mom who's seen X amount of other people several times over, not only other lactation consultants, but pediatrician, people in the hospital. And then they come to see me, and whatever it is, like in your case, it's tongue tie. Then you tell them something that they've been wondering. And for some people, it is like almost a blessing, like, thank goodness, I've been wondering, I've been thinking, and now she's validating. Or it could go the other way, is that some moms, some people have told them maybe, but when the experts tell them the baby is not, and then they come to see me, and in this case, I tell them, well, your baby actually is tied. It's hard for them to come to terms, because frequently the question is, well, how come you can easily say that the baby is within just a few minutes, and I've been to all these other people? And so that causes a whole ball of confusion in parents' brains, and they're not sure which way to go. So it could go either way, but it sounds like, in your way, you were like, oh, a breath of fresh air. I was
Well,
wondering, and she's validating.
yeah, my intuition told me he was tongue-tied. And so what was frustrating was when the experts were telling me he wasn't. And I'm like, but I kind of feel he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I took it easily. It was easy for me to accept when you told me because I had already felt that. But also you provided an explanation for why they were missing it. Because my son wasn't extremely tongue-tied, but he did have a very high palate. And so I think what they were missing, so I guess the two, we won't get into all the details of tongue tie, but the two together can make it very, very difficult. But they
Right.
were missing the small tongue tie. They're like, oh, he looks fine.
Yeah,
But
there's one of the things in our business that we say: a small tongue tie is still a tongue tie, and a
yes,
small minor tie can still mean major problems with breastfeeding. So when we use the word sometimes just minor or small, it then kind of
mm-hmm.
makes parents think, well, it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, I work with that all the time. I can't tell you how many parents tell me, well, I took my baby to the pediatrician. They said that it's just a little bit, it really shouldn't interfere with breastfeeding. So what else can I do, Lori? Like, let's go back to square one. Let me try and explain it to you from my point of view, again, from an anatomical point of view. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you could understand that what your physician that's saying minor, it becomes major for you if it's getting in the way of breastfeeding.
Exactly. And that's the key. That's exactly what you said. So true. Is the experience that you're having with breastfeeding. I mean, it might have been little, but my nipples said otherwise.
My nipples said otherwise. Taking a little break to talk to you, to bring to you my shameless promotion. If you miss me talking about my new favorite acronym, it is shameless, which stands for spending hours at maximizing exposure leverages endless sales success. What does shameless mean to me in relationship to the All About Breastfeeding show? It means that I must constantly work at this podcasting and promotion thing. Let's face it, if I don't do any shameless promotion, I will end up with nameless promotion. Nobody will know who I am. My shameless promotion for today? Well, I would like to direct you to www.allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype. Skype consults are excellent if you have lots of questions and concerns about breastfeeding before you have your baby. Skype consults with me are also great after you've had your baby. We can go over a whole plan to help you prepare for going back to work. We can talk about pumping, what pumps to use. We can talk about when do you begin pumping, the frequency, storage guidelines, how to work with daycare, with bottles, how to work with your employer as far as pumping goes. There are so many topics to talk about. I would love to help you. All you need to do to schedule your Skype consult is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype. And for the month of November and December, you will receive a $20 discount for being an All About Breastfeeding listener. All right, Shameless Promotion Week number 3 is now ending. Let's get back to the show where we left off with Shannon telling us how relieved she felt when her intuition about why breastfeeding was hurting so much was validated. So what happens in the following week or two as far as breastfeeding goes?
Well, you referred me to a doctor that could help. So I took him in and he got laser on both his tongue and his lip tie because he had both. And, from there it was, I think our biggest problem was that we were pumping and he hadn't been on the breast for a couple of days. And as you know, for a newborn, that's kind of a big deal. You can't, you shouldn't take them off the breast that long. So I might have fixed the lip tie, but then now suddenly I had a newborn that wouldn't latch.
Right. And you know that it has something to do with all of the interferences that have gone on, and many for good reason, because if you can't feed him at the breast, then you need to get milk into him. Mm-hmm. But it makes it difficult for you when now you've paved the way for him to latch on, and now he's frustrated with the process of latching on because he hasn't been used to it.
Right, because like I said before, we had been feeding him through a dropper.
And the dropper, I'm not a fan of for more than a feeding.
Yes, exactly. So I think what we did first was put him on the bottle, work with him on the bottle. And I was able to get him to take a bottle before I got him to take the breast. But it's like a stepping stone.
So you worked really hard at breastfeeding.
Really, 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 really hard, to the point of, because he wouldn't latch, what's the best thing to do? According to you, it was keep him on me. I mean, I wore him around all the time. And the second he even seemed hungry, it was like letting him root to the breast. So I just baby wore him all day.
And I'm so glad that you were able to do that, because one of the hardest things when babies are when they're getting milk from a bottle is that we know that that's their sustenance. They need to get milk. And so it's okay to give them a bottle. What happens with that, though, is that every feeding that they're having with the bottle is further and further removed from breastfeeding. We're sitting them up. They're getting milk in a different way. They're getting a different texture in their mouth. And so to not put a baby to the breast or try or baby wear means that they're not smelling you. They're not touching you. They're not making that contact with you. And so I talk to parents all the time that it's okay, give your baby a bottle, but let's still work on breastfeeding. And one of the important parts about working on breastfeeding is to keep the baby close to the breast, easy access. And rather than, the baby's crying, now you have to put away whatever it is you're doing. You have to take off your shirt, take off your bra, set up with the pillow, set up with this, set up with everything. And by that time, they've escalated into a crying frenzy. And I always say, you want to keep them familiar with the breast, with your body, with your touch, with your smell. So I talk to parents a lot about baby wearing while they're trying to bring their baby back to the breast. And I also know that it's something easy for me to say. That's why I'm saying I'm glad that you're able to do it. Because again, women are postpartum, and if your breasts have been hurting, your nipples are scared, now I'm telling you to wear your baby, and you just have a lot of other hygienic things going on, and you're incredibly sleep deprived. So to tell you to baby wear is still, and I love baby wearing, we love baby wearing, but to have a mom try and do that more so than she might have done at that point when she's not feeling her best is another big thing. We're always asking new moms to do big things when
true.
in another part of their life, it's just not a big deal at all. But at that time in your postpartum life, it may be a lot to do. So I was very grateful that you were able to do that.
Right. And if I wasn't doing skin to skin, you know, whenever I actually wanted to do something, I did do the Moby wrap, or my husband would hold him. Like you said, he's very hands-on. So my husband would have skin to skin, which is great for bonding for them too. Because you know, we talk about my experience, but I mean, my husband wasn't having the best time of his life either. You know, it was hard for him.
Because he's watching you go through all this and seeing this mom-baby pair and this relationship in I always call it, not always, but I think frequently it's a crisis mode. You're in crisis there. And he's having to watch this. And again, also far removed from what his thoughts were about postpartum and mom and baby and breastfeeding. You know, we're expecting, like I said, the sun to be out and the birds to be singing. And instead you've got, you know, dark clouds and pouring rainstorm and thunder over your household. And you're just waiting for that to lift and things to get easier and calmer and to be working the way that you expected, right?
Right. And I think sometimes we as a society have a perspective. I see memes and things all the time about, I saw one yesterday. Like, here I am breastfeeding my son, and I'm looking over at my husband sound asleep with his useless nipples, you know, kind of being upset that the guy can't breastfeed and maybe he has it better off. But I kind of look at it like, you know, how hard would it be to see somebody that you love struggling so much, and then you have this new child that you want to bond with and that you want everything for, and you love them both and you want to help them. How helpless would you feel? Like, that's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling either. So I wouldn't say that dads have it easy.
If anybody can relate to what you just said, exactly that, Shannon, just think about a time when you've felt helpless and how painful it feels to be helpless and wishing that you could do anything to help that loved one. So I totally agree with you to say that he's got it easy or easier. I don't know that we can necessarily make that equation. And I also frequently realize that guys or partners, we're not really talking about them much and taking their feelings into consideration. And I just watched recently, I watched it for like the third time, a movie called When the Bough Breaks. It's about postpartum depression. And one of the women who was being highlighted, Lindsay, at some point she was having the cameras were following her and her experience. And at one point they interviewed her husband and they were asking him some of the usual questions, and he answered pretty easily. And then he said, well, how was that for you? How did that make you feel? What was your experience like? And he was silent. And he said, and then like 10 seconds or so later, he said, you know, nobody ever asked me about how I was doing. So I don't know how to answer that. And that just struck home with me again, that frequently we don't take their feelings into account. We think they're just some bystander. But, you know, your husband is living with you, sleeping with you in the same house, watching you go through pain, and he's feeling the pain too, and he's wishing that he could make it go away and make everything better. So I do like that we're talking about the partners a bit, in this case, your husband, because it is affecting them also, and that it's affecting the whole family balance. And even as moms, like, what you're doing is like you're actively trying to make it better. Each feeding, you're trying to get her better latch. You're asking, you're talking to people, you're experimenting. And that's why I said, I know your husband, like if he could, he would say, well, maybe I could try and make this better. But that just increases that helplessness, because there's a lot that he can do and did do for you, I'm sure. But the actual art of helping you with breastfeeding is not something that he could actually do himself. He can support you in every single other way, but not that. And if that is not working, that's where that helplessness comes from.
Right. And that's why I think the role of a lactation consultant and also postpartum doulas is it's so important because, you and your significant other have the same goal of trying to help establish a nice foundation for your newborn. And, but you both need support, not just the mom. And I kind of see it as a cycle of us treating men or the men in our lives or significant others, could also be female, that they're not as important or that their struggle isn't real. And therefore it kind of becomes that for them. So if our perspective is that they don't have as big of a part in this, then that's begins to be the role that they play.
Exactly. That's what we're saying it is, and that's what it is, right?
Yeah. hmm Whereas if we can get the dads more support, then I think it would make it easier on everybody.
Yes, I know that, and I do a fairly good job of that, but I'm also
Yeah.
working really hard to do even better, much better with that. And in one of my shows, I interviewed a male IBCLC, Tom Johnston, and he's also a midwife. And he gave me a lot of good tips, a lot of things for me to think about, and a good refresher for me to make sure that I pay attention to the other people in the mom's life and how well they could support her, and not only focus on the breastfeeding mom, because that whole circle, whoever is staying with mom after the baby's born and is going to be a primary helper, needs to really be taken into account, not only what they know, but their feelings and their experience.
Yes, I agree.
So tell me, was there one point where, with everything that we know, that you were so tenacious and highly motivated? For many of us, when we're having big struggles like pain, milk supply, poor weight gain, for many of us, there does come a point where we hit a wall and we're just really at that breaking point and we're really almost ready to give up for some of us. Did you have that experience at all? Where you
Oh,
were
yes.
that close?
Yes, I remember it vividly. And I called you, and my husband was there, and we were on speaker. I think that the turning point came because it's just like, all I want to do is breastfeed. You're just doing everything. You're like climbing up this wall, and it's a struggle, and just the emotions, the feelings. And then I called you, and I'm just like, I just don't know if I could do it anymore. And at one point you said, I understand. Like, if you can't do it anymore, it's okay. And I was like, oh, yes, it's a choice. Yes, I forgot. And I think there's power in choice. And when you get so caught up in accomplishing your goal of breastfeeding, you can forget that you made that choice. When you make the choice, you release being a victim. You're not a victim anymore of breastfeeding horror. You're just like, no, I choose to move forward or I choose not to move forward at this time. And either choice is okay. And I think that it was just so empowering for me to realize at that moment that, oh, I chose this. And okay, I think I can keep going a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that. And of course, I don't remember that exact conversation, but I thank you for bringing it up, because I think that's helpful, because you're going to be the voice that I cannot be for every mom, to be on the other end of that line, reminding her that she does have a choice. And I really like the way that you framed it by saying that once, because we get so caught up in that goal of breastfeeding and all the emotions that come with it. And then, whereas I do not agree with this at all, thinking that someone's a failure if they are not able to continue or choose not to, but it's
Right.
frequently the words that mothers tell themselves or how they think other people will perceive them. So they
Mm-hmm.
really get caught up in that goal that they must breastfeed, they must figure this out, and lose sight of that it is a choice. And then when they remember that it's a choice, just like you said, it allows them to open up, like to clear away the cobwebs a little bit and think a
Yeah.
little bit more clearly about what it is they think they can do and want to do, rather than what they're telling themselves they must or think society is telling them. That's really,
Right.
really important.
Quick side effect of this is that my goal was to exclusively breastfeed my child and not give him formula. I kind of got, stuck on this thing. And at one point, I think when I called you, we had bought the formula. The formula was in the house, so it's there staring at me. And I was lucky to have a friend that offered donor milk. So I didn't have to choose formula because I had donor milk. But you would think, because I was able to exclusively breastfeed my child, no food, no nothing until he was 7 months old. And I did that I'd be like, oh, all for it. Whereas I kind of went the other way, totally understanding why moms would introduce formula. A mom thinks that's what she needs to do to supplement, or, then I'm like, you do what you need to do. Just becoming an overall support system for moms with whatever they choose.
Yes, thank you for saying that. We don't live in the house with the moms. We are not there with her. We don't fully understand everything that she's bringing to her breastfeeding table. So lest we not judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have to remember that. Tell me, do you remember when you got to the point where you turned around and you said, I could breathe now. Breastfeeding is working. I'm not having to look and think and pay attention every time I breastfeed. I don't feel like I have to be home in the quietness and everything has to be perfect. I am now a breastfeeding mom that can just carry on with my day and easily breastfeed my baby. So when were you able to let go of all the troubles and worries and concerns about breastfeeding?
Honestly, think I let it go until I started introducing solid food. I remember at one point, he might have been 4 months. We were into the breastfeeding thing, like 4 months or something. And I went to see you for maybe 3 months. I don't know. You were like, because I was still holding my breast, and you're like, you still need to hold it? And I'm like, yes. It was like a defense. I felt defensive still, even at 3 months into it or whatever. Like I just needed to have that control. So it was a process. It was definitely a process for me. And I just remember I 5 months, maybe it started I emotionally started letting some things go. But yeah, it didn't happen overnight.
Before you were able to fully let go of worries and concerns, did you get to a point where breastfeeding was enjoyable for you?
Yes. I mean, I think it was always had aspects of being enjoyable, even whenever it was painful, just because of that connection. I really enjoyed connecting with my son. I really enjoyed having him close. It helped me with bonding. I think after the laser surgery, like you said, I was in crisis mode and there was no bonding. It's like there was this child that every time I put him to my breast, he hurt me. And I think it ended up being okay. My son and I are like extremely close right now. He's still mommy, mommy, mommy. And this
Love
morning,
it, love it, love it.
yes, love, 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 love. This morning he came in and he just gave me a kiss and he's like, just wanted to give you a good morning kiss. And I'm like, oh. So, but what I'm saying is I didn't bond with him in the beginning because it's just like this, he kept hurting me.
Yeah.
And, but that even if you don't bond right away because you are in crisis mode, that it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not going to ever bond with your child.
Yeah. And I also feel like the whole bonding thing is a little bit over analyzed too.
Yeah. I think it's going to be like some big moment.
I know. And for many of us, it's not. It's this gradual getting to know and be comfortable and love. Like, I shouldn't say love because I think we all love our baby, but this sense of, to me, that bonding thing, like when I really felt it is that one day I realized that if a car was going to be hitting my child, I wouldn't even think twice about jumping in front of that car. I would do anything to save the life of my baby. I would put my life first. And I don't know, I mean, I would kind of fake say that on day 1, day 3, day 7, but I wasn't really feeling it. But there came a point where one day where I just knew it and I wouldn't have a millisecond of a thought about doing so. And to me, that was when I knew that bond was solid. But I think it is gradual bonding thing that's going on. And then one day we do really feel that and really do kind of know it to our core. So I think it's that's another one of those things that creates a lot of guilt with parents and with moms, is feeling that we're not bonding with our baby. And believe me, I mean, here's my take on it. You're a mom who's sitting, who's in pain, who's worried, who's anxious. Every time your baby cries, you're crying because you got to feed your baby, and still you're doing it. Are you bonded to that baby? I believe so.
Yeah.
Are you necessarily feeling it, knowing it to your core? Perhaps not. But who else is going to go through such lengths to sit there and cry and feed a baby and be in pain all at the same time?
Yes. And I think before you go through these experiences, it's easier to judge. And that's okay. That's part of the human experience. But I remember my doula, we were talking about breastfeeding. Are you going to breastfeed? Yes, yes, yes. We talked about her breastfeeding experience. And I was like, well, how long did you breastfeed for? And she kind of looks at me and just looks around. She's like, well, I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird, but I'm still breastfeeding. I think her child was like 3. So she extended breastfeeding. And I remember what I thought at that moment. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. Judgment, right? It's just like,
and then
I went, what I went through. I mean, what I went through, and we're talking about it. Like, try living it. Once you get the hang of it, and what it was good. I'm like, I'm never gonna stop. Are you kidding me? It was too hard to get going. And my son said it tasted like vanilla ice cream. So I'm like, I don't think he's ever gonna stop me.
Why would you?
I don't want to, quit vanilla ice cream. That would be horrible. So yeah, I guess, it was a whole exercise. And for me, just becoming a mom, going through these experiences and understanding that it's easy to judge when you haven't been there. And I kind of knew it before I had a kid, but I started doing the things that I didn't think I would do, like extended breastfeeding. It's okay.
Is your experience as a mother a big part of what motivated you to start SisterMom, your support website?
Oh, for sure. And I would say even before I had Luca, just being pregnant and going through all the websites, I mean, I was overwhelmed. It was information overload. And it was hard to find out who was good and who wasn't good. And, making all these phone calls and trying to figure out what would work for me. I just thought at that time, I'm like, you know what? We just need a website where everyone's already done all this work for me, that I can just go and find the really good experts and the really good articles and the really good information. So that was my motivation to start SisterMom. But it got even more so whenever I went through the struggle of trying to find the lactation consultant. And now it's just like, listen, you're having problems, you need to go straight to Lori. All right. Forget all this other stuff. I've had the experience with you. A lot of the experts on my website I've had personal experiences with that have been amazing. And not every expert is good for everybody, but these guys are good. And that was my motivation to start it.
Yeah. And what I love about that is your relationship with the experts on your website is similar to my relationships with the experts that I refer moms to. You're absolutely right. We're all different beings with different personalities. Some of us have a quirky sense of humor, some dry, some are talkers, and we're quiet people, but yet we like to be around people who are talkers because that helps us a little bit. We're just different beings. And so let's just say that the experts that we've each created a library of experts. The great thing for the moms that we're connected to and that you have on your website is that while it might not match personality-wise, that at least they know that this person has been vetted out by you. And the thing is, if people, especially if they get to know you, which is one of the reasons I'm thrilled with doing this video, because people can get to know us much better via video rather than just audio. And once they get to know you, Shannon, they can then take that to the next step and say, well, she's had this expert on her site. She's written this article and it all sounds really good, it is going to be much easier for the mom to connect with that expert, being that they now know you, have a good sense of what you're about, your personality, and now they know that you have a connection with this expert. That's going to be so much easier for them to connect with that person if and when they need them. And while it may not work out 100% of the time, largely because of different personalities, I bet you anything, a good 90% of the time, that will be a great match because you have done a lot of the work for them. And one of the things that we both know is that one of the most difficult things to do as a new mother, particularly when we're reaching out for help in whatever it is, we're typically in an anxiety, worried mom hat crisis mode.
Yeah.
And it's the most difficult time, even though we have the world of the internet, sometimes we have too many choices. And we go in that information overload, and I've learned that it's called paralysis analysis. Like, now there are too many and I'm paralyzed with analyzing each and every one. And how good is it for a mom to be able to come on SisterMom website and find an article about a concern that she has and be able to connect with that person? That way to get help, that pathway is so much quicker and so much easier. And so that's one of the things that I love about having trusted people under your wings, so to speak, and that you're gathering all these great and wonderful experts. And so I really love all that about it. And now I'd like for you to tell us, expand on what I've just said a little bit about SisterMom website and tell us all about it.
Okay. Well, basically, it's a reference website for moms that they can go on. And right now I have 8 experts ranging
Great.
from birth doulas, postpartum doulas, counselors, parent coaches, lactation consultants. And all of these people most of the people on the website right now I've had personal experiences with, and I've also had clients that have had personal experience with them. Like, I know them so well. They are so amazing. I'm going to be adding 2 more who are also amazing. And I will slowly, it's not going to be one of these things where one day you're going to look and you're going to see 100 experts, because it's a process. I make sure that each and every one of these people are not only an expert in their field, but they're affordable. So it's not like I'm not getting the $200 an hour parent coach. I'm sure they're really good, but there's other people out there who are also amazing. The experts write articles so you can get to know them a little bit. They give you a little bit of free advice in the article. And then also, one of the things that each of the experts offer is a perk. So you can get to know them with a little bit of I think for you have an ebook on there. So moms can read through your ebook and get to know what you're about. Some of my experts have a free consultation, which is wonderful. So even moms that don't have a lot of money can still connect with these experts and, take away something that will hopefully help them in their parenthood journey, make it a little bit easier. That's the hope.
Right now, you said you have 8 experts.
I have
And
8. I'm adding 2 more.
So, and each one of us have written an article, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're also writing articles.
I am. Yes.
What are a couple of topics that you've written on?
Well, my background is I'm a licensed counselor, and I have a communication degree as well. So I've always just really loved communication and how can we make our relationships better through good communication? This has been a question of mine. I'm just passionate about it. I read on it. It's just my thing. I developed something called the perspective process, which is a simple technique people can use to help get themselves grounded and in the moment. So you could be in the middle of an argument with your significant other, and you can use this perspective process to really help you through that communication and take it to the next level. People really liked it, and I went around and accidentally got into like corporations and started training their employees, like doing presentations for Intel. And it was a lot of fun, but that wasn't my passion. After I had my son, being a mom was my passion. So now I'm just taking those concepts and I'm just helping support moms, help them get out of crisis mode and just enjoy the experience a little bit more. And it also works really well with teens, which has always been a passion of mine when I was counseling just one-on-one clients. I just love working with teenagers. And teenagers actually get it more than adults do.
I know when you told me that, I was like, someone who likes working with teens?
Oh, I love teens. Oh, they're just amazing. And like I said, when I teach them the perspective process, like they're just blow my mind. They're always giving me more. I learn from them. And, once the parent and the teenager have this communication technique, it's amazing to see, how their relationship grows from it.
I think that's so amazing. Let's try and make a relationship to the work that you're doing and with the postpartum mom. So can you give us a classic example of an argument that a couple would have that you hear all the time? And just do a little role playing with me, and because I want to give moms an idea about, rather than you just saying that it is helpful, let's talk about like something that they can actually walk away with.
Okay. So tell me a little bit, about something that maybe you and your husband keep talking about, like that keeps coming up for you in arguments. It could be about, money. It could be about the dog, whatever it is.
All right. So one of our running arguments when my kids were younger is I just felt like he didn't understand. I knew that he was empathetic, but my thing is that he left the house at 6 o'clock in the morning and maybe didn't come back until 6 or 7. And that most of his awaking hours were very similar to whatever his life was like before he became a father. And then he had 2 or 3 hours at home of fatherhood until we went to bed. And so I felt like he didn't understand because he wasn't there for those 12 hours of parenting. And he kept saying, but I do understand and I do know. And I kept saying, no, how can you? You're not here. And being that I felt like he couldn't understand, that I felt like I couldn't really accept his advice when he came home and I was venting about something. So that was a pretty running argument.
Okay, so you guys had some history, which we usually do when these arguments come up, that has triggers for you, like you go on automatic pilot. So what's something that he might have said when he came home that would have triggered you?
Well, it became a point where this is one of the things he would say. He would say is, so he reached a point where he didn't even ask how I was doing because his joke was he never knew what he was walking into. So he went from asking, how are you doing? How was your day? To just walking in and saying hi. And then like I got all my dander up because I'm like, don't you want to know how my day was? Don't you want to? So then I could then like just blow off steam and tell him. So he then stopped even asking how my day was. And then that got me even more angry. And as I look back on it now and we talk about it, I was like, you were just in this place and it was a lose-lose.
Yes. And you get that now, but in the moment, it was really hard for you.
Yes.
Because when he would walk in and say hi, and then what would he do? He would say hi, and then what would he do?
And nothing, you know what? I don't even remember, but nothing according to what I wanted him to do.
Okay. So he didn't, whatever that was. So he'd say hi and then go get ready for dinner.
Yeah. Like just miss this whole important part of what I needed to talk about. Like that was on the side there. And then, if I was bringing it up, it would be bringing it up in a complaining way, not, if he asked, then it was okay for me to answer. But if he didn't ask and now I brought it up, then I felt like it was more like me complaining.
So what's really important, what helps ground people in these moments is that you identify what actually happened. So if I were to ask you before I explained anything, I said, well, what happened? You might say, he said hi, and then it's obvious he doesn't even care. He just, doesn't ask me about my day anymore. And I just really don't think he's into this fathering thing. That would be what happened for you. But
Right.
What really happened? What happened is your husband walked in and said hi. That's what happened.
Yeah, now I'm thinking he doesn't care.
But did that happen?
No.
No. Okay. So what I do in my sessions is we explore a little bit of where that he doesn't care comes from, but we also I help you become aware that he doesn't care didn't happen. So whenever we get into these arguments and these things where we get triggered, it really helps ground us when we can identify what happened. And the only thing that ever usually happens is something was said and then a behavior. So he said hi, and then he walked to his room. That's what happened. So you're just like, because otherwise, what happens is that people begin to think their interpretations happened. He doesn't care is an interpretation.
Right.
The cool thing about interpretations is there's more than one, right? So he doesn't care is just one interpretation for you. So if you were my client, we could explore some other interpretations. But in that moment, if you can actually just become aware of what's happening, what's being said, and then the behavior, and just stop right there and breathe. It's going to take it's a whole,
Yeah.
then you begin to actually have a real conversation with your husband. You get out of your interpretations. It's a process, and we can't do it here in 5 minutes.
No, but I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's so interesting. And I think it gives other people watching this and listening an idea of ways in which you can help. Because I'm that kind of listener and viewer, like I need a little bit more information. Well, how can she actually help me? So just to do this little role playing gives me actually a really good idea already. It's interesting that we just did that though, because I didn't have your help, but I know I would have benefited and learned things a whole lot earlier. But one of the things that I'm doing better with my husband now, and that I've been able to explain to him in helping me, that would have helped me then, is I say to him now, if you don't tell me what you're thinking and feeling, then I get to write the whole scenario in my head.
Oh yeah, you get to write that whole story.
I get to write. So now I have my story rather than your story. So you really need to tell me what you're thinking and feeling. And
yes,
that has helped
you
a
got
lot.
it. And that's another step in the sessions is I teach people how to ask questions and using Socratic questioning, which was it's a questioning system developed by Socrates. It's really cool. He just basically acts like he knows nothing. And
Yeah.
that, like, the wisest thing you can do is just act like you know nothing and ask the stupidest questions, to really get the real story.
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed to say how many years that took me, that you probably could have helped me right away. All right, well, thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that you would like for my audience to know about SisterMom? It's because I know it's huge for you. It's a passion. It's a new endeavor. And I also love the fact that you're saying you're just not throwing up a whole bunch of stuff all at once just to get all this content out and to be able to brag about all these experts you have, that you really are paying close attention to who you're inviting to be a guest on your website. So I'm really excited about that. Is there anything else you wanted to tell us?
No, I mean, just it's a work in progress. Keep checking back, and it's going to keep growing, but it grows at the rate that it's just its own thing. I'm just going along for the ride. Sometimes I don't even know what kind of expert I need until a mom comes up and says, hey, I'm really having a problem with this whole step parenting thing. Can you get an expert on step parenting? Wow, I would have never thought about that.
We listen and we learn from the people that we work with, right? Because we don't know everything. Tell us the website. How can they contact you?
www.sistermom.com. You can also look it up, realmomsupport.com. So Real Mom Support, Google that. I'll be right there staring at you.
I love your colors. I love your logo.
Thank you. And I have a little stamp of approval, a Sister Mom expert that you, Lori, get because I think you're amazing. And it's a precious thing, and I don't hand them out very often.
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. I really believe in you and everything you're doing.
Well, give your family a hug for me, your handsome husband and your beautiful son. I thank you for your time. I do miss your husband. I love the fact that he came to you with consults. He's so much fun, and I enjoyed watching him interact with you and with Luca. It just tickled my heart.
Yes, and he's a lot like your husband. The things that we do, we have our husbands behind the scene. It looks like our, Sister Mom or whatever, our websites are all done by us. But no.
Oh, no.
I am not tech savvy at all, as you learned today, us trying to get this up and running.
Both of us. What's the first thing I did? I'm freaking out, and what did I do? I called my husband.
Yeah, we can't get it to work. But
yes.
So they're in the background really helping. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you being with us today.
Oh, thank you. Always a pleasure. And thank you for all of the help that you gave me in my journey through motherhood.
A pleasure. You're welcome. What a great time I had with Shannon. Did you like the role playing? Kind of made me a bit sad, as I could see how much quicker I would have made headway with the same argument that I used to have with Alan years ago. I know you can't just wave your arm and have things change immediately, but I certainly would have been much closer to resolving one of our same old arguments if I had the opportunity to work with Shannon when my kids were younger. Don't forget to go to sistermom.com and check out her website. Also, don't forget to join our Facebook group. All you need to do is go to Facebook and search the 4 words, All About Breastfeeding Community. Join us. Hope to see you there. Until next show, bye-bye.